Okay, so we're outside again, and we are reading the book Howliday Inn on chapter 5. She's gone! The next morning, I startled out of my sleep by the sound of Harrison's voice. "Oh no!" he cried. I moved quickly to the front of my bungalow to see what was going on. So did everyone else. Harrison stood in the center of the compound, shaking his head, as Jill flew out of the office door. "What is it?" she shouted. "What's happened?" Harrison pointed at Louise's bungalow. The door was wide open. "She's gone," he proclaimed. Immediately, I shifted my gaze to Max. Our eyes met. His jaw fell open, and a look of shock and bewilderment swept over him. "But how?" Jill asked. "This has never happened before, has it?" "Not in the 3 summers I've worked here," Harrison said. Slowly, he surveyed the entire compound, looking at each of us in turn. Then suddenly, he called out, "Look!" We all turned our heads sharply in the direction he was pointing. Unfortunately, I hit my nose on the wall of the bungalow, and I couldn't see a thing except stars. So it took Jill's words to make clear what it was that had so astonished him. "Oh no," she said. "The gate, it's open." "How can it be?" Harrison asked. "There's no way any of the animals could open that lock." "I don't know," Jill said, her brow wrinkled in confusion and distress. "Unless one of us—" She stopped speaking then, and a strange expression came over her face. "What is it?" Harrison asked. "What's the matter?" I did it," she said after a minute. Her voice was soft and a little wavery. "What do you mean?" Harrison asked. His eyebrows came together to form a hedge across his forehead. "I did it," Jill repeated. "I left the gate open. Don't you remember when I ran in to get the towels, I accidentally let the office door lock behind me, so I had to go back by the gate. I was in such a hurry and it was raining so badly, I guess I just didn't notice. Her shoulders slumped, and it was another moment before she spoke again. In the interim, a flash of lightning ripped through the sky, letting us know that the storm was not yet over. "Oh, I feel terrible," Jill went on. "It's all my fault. What are we going to do?" Much to my surprise, Harrison came over to Jill and put his arm around her shoulders. "Don't worry," he said softly. "We'll find her. It was a mistake. It could have happened to anyone. Come on, let's give everyone their breakfast, and then you and I will go out looking for her." Jill seemed as surprised as I was at Harrison's concern. She looked at him out of the corner of her eyes. "What if we don't find her?" "Then she'll find us," Harrison said calmly. "She'll wind her way back home sooner or later." He smiled then and said gently, "Okay?" "Okay," Jill replied, accepting Harrison's attempts at reassurance, and together they went back inside the office. After breakfast, Chester and I put our heads together to consider Louise's escape. Harrison and Jill had let us out early for exercise, since there was no way of knowing when the storm would start up again. "What did I tell you?" Chester asked me. "I give up," I answered, not at all sure what he was referring to. "Didn't I say there would be trouble?" "What trouble?" I countered. "Louise ran away. Makes sense, if you ask me." "Oh, really?" "Sure. Would you care to enlarge on your theory?" "I'd be delighted," I replied. Louise was very upset about Max's flirting with Georgette. Agreed? Agreed. So when she saw that the front gate had been left open last night, she seized the opportunity to run off and teach Max a lesson. She'll be back. And that's it? Simple, really. Just open the door to her bungalow and out she went. Chester replied, licking his paws. His long tongue moved slowly between each of his toes as he reflected on what I'd said. No doubt he was impressed with my powers of deduction. And did she unlock Max's door too? Huh? I asked, completely thrown. What do you mean? What I mean is that Max's door was open this morning too. You may not have noticed it, but I did. You have to learn to be observant in this business, Harold. What business is that, Chester? The business of crime detection, Chester answered, neatly snapping his head in my direction to look me squarely in the eye. Crime detection, I responded. I could feel the hairs along the back of my neck rise slightly. Chester has always had the ability to alarm me, often unnecessarily. I was hoping this was the case. Chester, I said, I think you're getting carried away. On the contrary, he replied, it may well have been Louise who was carried away. Oh, was all I could say, for Max's voice suddenly bellowed throughout Chateau Bow Wow. It's no good, he groaned, no good. Chester and I looked out to see him sitting in the middle of the compound, a forlorn expression smeared across his face like after-breakfast jam. The ever-present Georgette was at his side. Now, Max, you mustn't carry on so, she said. Hussy, I heard myself utter under my breath. I can't help it, Georgette, Max cried, his voice cracking. It's all my fault this happened. I never should have spoken to her the way I did. I could see Taxi moving in Max's direction. Max looked up and saw him coming. I'm sorry, Max, Taxi started to say. Not now, Taxi, Max fairly shouted. But Max, no, Taxi, I want to be alone. And Max picked himself up and lumbered back to his bungalow. Georgette followed. He turned to her suddenly and said, Please, Georgette, I need some space. Of course, she answered. I understand. This is not the time for us. She turned and walked away, her spirit trailing behind her like a long shadow on a sultry summery day. Taxi, meanwhile, stood in the center of the compound. From the look on his face, he was not pleased that Max had dismissed him so abruptly. After a moment's deliberation, he moved away toward one corner of the compound and began to scratch himself behind his ears. Come on, Chester said to me. We've got some exploring to do. Okay, I answered, but I don't know what you expect to find. Anyway, if you're suspecting Max of anything, I guess you can rule him out now. Boy, is he upset, poor fellow. Is he? Chester asked. Perhaps he is a poor fellow, as you say, or perhaps a poor actor putting on a good show. We were walking in the direction of Louise's bungalow when we bumped into Howard and Heather. They both jumped in surprise. Sorry, I said. Didn't mean to startle you. Oh, it's nothing, Howard said. No, it's nothing at all, said Heather. Oh my, I'm so jumpy today. I don't quite feel myself. No, sorry about that beastly howling last night, old chap, Howard said to me. He turned with a nod to Chester. Certainly hope we weren't the cause of Louise's departure, Heather added. She giggled suddenly, and then just as suddenly she gasped and tried to catch her breath. What is it? Howard cried. Oh, it's nothing, Heather replied, after letting out a great sigh. I'm having such trouble breathing today. I don't know what it is. She looked at Howard, her big eyes wide in bewilderment. The two of them stared at each other after a long moment, their heads bobbing up and down in unison. I think we'd better, Howard began. Go home, Heather finished. Yes, dear, I think we'd best. Do excuse us, she said, turning to us. I'm just not herself, said Howard. And they turned and left. Chester and I just watched them go. Typical werewolfian behavior, said Chester, his voice full of authority. I'm sure I would have asked him to elaborate if it were not for the fact that I didn't really care in the least what he had to say. So I changed the subject. Weren't we going to do some exploring? I asked. Yes, Chester answered, snapping himself out of his pensive mood. Follow me. I followed Chester to Louise's bungalow, where we stood for what felt like a long time, staring at the emptiness inside. Just think, I said, feeling a tear come to my eye. Last night she was here. Today she's gone. Yes, said Chester slowly. That's exactly the word. Gone. Escaped, I added, but soon she'll be back with us. Nonsense, Chester said. She didn't escape, and she won't be back. No one comes back from murder. Murder? Of course murder, Chester replied evenly. It's all falling into place, don't you see? What's falling into place? The suspects, the motives, and now the evidence, said Chester. I was confused, which around Chester is a normal state of being, so it didn't alarm me. What evidence? I asked. Look for yourself, he said with a nod toward the bungalow. What do you see? I surveyed the interior. A rug, a water dish, a food dish, just like mine, I said. Ah, but it isn't just like yours. And that's the key, Harold. Why? I don't see anything so different. Look again, and this time use your powers of observation, such as they are. Now, what do you see? I scrunched up my eyes and looked carefully at each square inch of space, as if studying for a final exam at obedience school. Well, Chester prodded, a rug, a water dish, a food dish. That's all. Chester sighed and shook his head. Sometimes I despair, Harold. Allow me to fill you in on what you've missed. Please do. The rug, how is it different from yours? I shrugged. It's all jumbled up. Chester went on. A real mess, in fact. And the food dish, almost filled with food. These observations may seem insignificant, but wait, my friend. Now we come to the water dish, perhaps the most significant of all. And yet, it isn't really the water dish, but what lies around it that is so disturbing. Thoroughly confused, I looked at the water dish and the floor around it. Nothing struck me as unusual. But don't you see, Chester asked, what is lying around the water dish? Water, I said. Exactly, he said. What else would you expect to find around a water dish? Ordinarily, the appearance of water around a water dish would not be out of the ordinary in the least. But given the unusual combination of factors, it is most striking, and it will be given serious consideration in our investigation. Suddenly, Lyle zoomed by us. Faster than a speeding bullet, I heard him call out as he passed, able to leap buildings in a single bound. Chester shook his head. That Lyle is a disgrace to our species, he said. Then back on the track of his previous thought, he said, Come on, Harold. I need to talk this out with you right now. We found a quiet spot under a tree in a corner of the compound. The storm seemed to have abated for the moment, and I thought how pleasant it would be just to lie here for a while and commune with nature. But Chester had other ideas. The rug, the food dish, and the water on the floor all added up to foul play, my dear Harold. Don't you see? Signs of a struggle, old boy. Old boy, I thought. My guess, and it's only a guess, mind you, is that someone pushed Louisa's head into the water while she was drinking. She resisted, which accounts for the spilled water and the wrinkled rug. And the food? I asked. She never finished her dinner, Chester said. She was, shall we say, interrupted. I must confess, Chester's deductions began to awaken in me the possibility that what he was suspecting was true. Still, I wasn't going to give up my theory of Louisa's escape so easily. What if it happened just as Jill and Harrison said? I asked. Isn't that possible? Sure, it's possible, Chester answered, but it's unlikely. Why? If Louise had run away, it's only logical she would have finished eating her dinner first, since she couldn't have known when she'd be eating her next meal. And why the appearance of a struggle? And why, Chester added, was Max's door still open? So you're saying Max did it? I'm not saying anything yet. Obviously, Max had the motive and the strength to pull it off. Let us picture this scene. He comes to Louisa's bungalow telling her he wants to apologize. She lets him in. He pushes her head into the water. She struggles, but he has the strength to hold her down. Afterward, he drags her body out through the front gate. But he's so upset today, I said, still not believing Max capable of such an act. Either that or, as I suggested before, he's pretending to throw us off, you see. I allowed as how I did. What about Georgette? I asked. She could have done it. I wouldn't put much past her. Yes, that's possible too. The only problem there is with that is that she didn't have the strength to hold Louisa's head down. What's more likely is that they're all in cahoots, she and Max. She may have been his accomplice, unless, of course, and here Chester thought for a moment, I have the method of the murder itself wrong. That will bear some thinking. In the distance, Lyle dropped from the branch of a tree onto Taxi's head. Taxi, not in the mood to wear Lyle as a hat, shook him off so violently that he landed several feet away. Stunned, he picked himself up and screamed at Taxi, I can tell when I'm not wanted. Don't think I can't take a hint. And he stormed off. What about Lyle? I asked. Do you remember how he threatened Louise yesterday? Indeed, I do, Chester answered, nodding slowly. You haven't seen the end of me, he said. Just watch out. And you know, Harold, Lyle is just crazy enough to do it. When you think about the murder, it could be anyone here. Anyone? I asked. Anyone, Chester affirmed. We know, for instance, that Howard and Heather were part werewolf. You know, I corrected. Oh, come on, Harold. No normal dog howls like that. Well, that's true. I don't. True, of course. You're not normal either. But we'll overlook that for the moment. Thank you, I said. Besides, werewolves are very hairy. Look at how hairy Howard and Heather are. They're wire-haired dachshunds. You said so yourself. They're very hairy, wire-haired dachshunds, Chester countered, refusing to allow logic to blow his theory. And if they are werewolves, they can change shape anytime they want. Huh? I inquired. Werewolves can change into anything, anytime at all, in order to assist them in their pursuit of evil. I tried to imagine Howard and Heather changing shape. It was hard to picture Howard as a clothes hanger, or Heather as a toaster oven. I was about to mention this to Chester when he spoke again. You have to admit they were behaving strangely today. Guilt, Harold. They were consumed with guilt. I said, I doubt werewolves feel guilty. The guilt comes from the wire-haired dachshund part of them. It's common to the breed. Oh, and what about Harrison and Jill? Do you suspect them too? Of course, said Chester. They're both a little on the shady side, if you ask me. Besides, we don't know the whole story on this Dr. Greenbrier yet. If you want my opinion, it's more than a little strange that he's gone off and left us in the care of those two. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they're acting on his orders. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Chester answered. I'm just thinking out loud. It's interesting, that's all. While the doctor is away, Louise disappears, and neither Harrison nor Jill seem too concerned about letting him know. Maybe they want to find Louise first, I suggested. Or maybe Greenbrier has ordered them to murder her. Oh, Chester, I said. This last was too much. What about Jill? Didn't you see how upset she was? Again, like Max, it could be she's faking. Or, and there he paused for a moment, perhaps Harrison is in it alone with the not-so-good doctor. That's a possibility, too. My head was spinning with Chester's theories. Then I thought of the one suspect he left out. And Taxi? I asked. He's too dumb to concoct a murder like this. He's too dumb to concoct a murder like this. I didn't like saying it about poor Taxi, but it was true. Chester didn't agree. You don't have to be a genius to murder, Harold. No, it isn't Taxi's intelligence that troubles me. It's his strength. He's a timid little fellow. I can't imagine him holding Louise down long enough to... Here Chester drifted off into thought. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. Unless, he said excitedly, if we change the method of murder, Then, yes, we know that Taxi is always buttering up to Max, right? Right, I agreed. And we know that his feelings were hurt yesterday when Max went off with Georgette instead of spending time with him. We also know he'd do anything to please Max to get back into his good graces. But murder? I asked. I couldn't believe it of Taxi. Sure, why not? I was on the wrong track, don't you see? If we believe that Louise was drowned, then Taxi is pretty much ruled out. He wouldn't have the strength, and I doubt he'd have the guts. But if the method of murder were less direct, if, for instance, and he paused dramatically, Louise was poisoned, I felt a jolt go through me. Chester, I cried. What is it? I just remembered something Taxi said yesterday. Max had just gotten through telling us how sometimes he thought he'd be better off without women. Yes? And Taxi told us about a television program where he'd seen a man feeling the same way murdered his wife. And the method, Harold? What method did he use? Poison? Chester and I sat very still for a moment. My gaze drifted to where I had seen Taxi sitting a few moments before. He was no longer there. Could it be? I asked myself. Could Taxi have murdered Louise to please him? What kind of warped mind existed within that peculiar little body of his? I turned my head then, and much to my surprise, saw that Taxi was sitting a few feet away. He stared at me in such a cold way that I knew he'd heard every word Chester and I had said about him. Taxi, I said, startled. He didn't respond, but continued to glare at me. I swallowed hard and tried to speak again. I'm... Taxi cut me off with a menacing growl, and before I could get another word past my lips, he turned and walked away. He heard, I said to Chester. Yes, was all Chester said in reply, but there was something in the way he said it that sent a shiver down my spine.